Hi there, welcome back to the Flask Mastery series. I'm Gorret Golden, and in this session we are going to embark on the endpoint that creates a new book. So let's dive right in. So first and foremost, within our controllers folder, we have the books subfolder. So within this subfolder, we are going to go ahead and create a new file for our book controller. So I'm going to go ahead and right click, new file. Then the file name for this is going to be bookcontroller.python. Since we already worked on our endpoints for the companies, I'm going to make use of the company controller by copying these up and pasting them within our book controller. And then I'll go ahead and modify the file. So the first thing I'm going to do is to update our blueprint from company to books. So this is going to be books blueprint, and then the name will also be updated to books for all occurrences of the company's blueprint variable. So within our blueprint instance, we can see that the parameter that we are passing in for this case is books, and then the URL prefix that we are going to use for all the endpoints of the books is going to be API/version1/books. So instead of creating companies, this comment is going to be updated to creating a new book. And for all occurrences of the company's blueprint, we are going to update this to books. So as of now, I'm going to update this to books, and I'll delete all these other endpoints. So for this endpoint, our URL path is going to be /create, and the method that we are going to work with is a post method, since we are going to be creating a new book resource. And still, for the purposes of security, we are going to go ahead and protect this endpoint with the JWT decorator function. And then for the function, instead of us having create company, this is going to be create book or create new book. So having updated that, we can now go ahead and implement the logic that creates a new book. So first and foremost, with the fact that we are working with a post request as of creating a new book, the first thing that we always have to do is to go ahead and store the JSON data that is coming from the request body. So that means that we have to go ahead and store the request values. I think it would also be request data instead of request values. And for that case, we are going to keep the data variable, and we get the data from the request body by accessing our request object, then get JSON. Now when it comes to our book model, we can pretty see that a book has attributes like the title, the pages, the price unit, the publication date, the ISBN, the genre, the description, the image, the user ID, the company ID, and then the timestamps. So what does this mean? It means that if we are to create a new book, we have to keep track or to store the attributes for each book, like the title, the pages, and etc., as we have seen on the model. So that means that within the request body, we have to create variables that are going to be storing these values for each attribute. So for that case, I'm going to go ahead and first of all delete these. Now instead of the origin, we have pretty seen that the book has a title. So this is going to be updated to the title. Then we have also seen that our book has the pages. So I'm going to update this up to pages. And then our book also has the price attribute. So this is going to be updated to price. Then with the price, we also have the price unit. So this will be updated to price unit. Then we also need the description. And then our book has a category, which we stored as the genre attribute. So this is going to be updated to genre. And then we also have the ISBN, which is going to be a unique book identifier digit. So this will be updated to the ISBN. Then we shall also keep track of the publication date of the book. So I'm going to cut this short by copying this up. And instead of the price, I'll copy this up and rename it to the publication date. And in addition, we also have the image. So I'll copy this up and update it with the image, having updated the indentation. So this is going to be the image. And we also have to store the company ID since each book is going to belong to a particular company. So we shall go ahead and create company ID variable 2 that is going to store the company that is coming from the request body. So this is the company ID, and of course it will be updated with the company ID value from the JSON data. So data.get the company ID. And we also know that each book that is going to be created must belong to a particular author. So that means that we also have to keep track of the user ID, which is the foreign key, on our book model. So to cater for that relationship, we shall keep in place the getJWT identity, as this method is going to be used to extract the user ID through the access token from the authorization headers. So having worked on that, the next step that we have to do is to cater for validations of the incoming request data, so that we ensure that we do not have redundant data within our database. So when it comes to validations of data, we always first of all cater for the required attributes on the model. So we have to ensure that attributes that are required, the data must always be passed in. And we also have to ensure that we are catering for constraints that were defined on our books table. So for this case, we are going to ensure that the title, the ISBN, the number of pages, the description, the price unit, the genre, and the publication date must be provided while creating a new book or while making a new request to this endpoint. So for that case, we have to update our if condition such that it checks if the title, the ISBN, the pages, or all the required attributes are passed in within the request. And if not, then we have to go ahead and return a response that all the fields are required, and then plus the status code, as this is going to be a bad request. So I'm going to go ahead and update the condition to cater for all the required attributes on the model. So if not the title or not the ISBN, so I'm going to go ahead and update this very fast. So having updated it, we can see that our if condition is going to check if not the title, or not the number of pages, or not the description, or not the price unit. And then we also need the company ID. So or not the company ID. Then I'm also forgetting the ISBN. So or not the ISBN, or not price, then or not the price unit. Then since we are not working with image uploading for this case, we can make the image nullable in a way that it's optional, meaning that if we are creating a new book, we can either pass in the image path, or we can keep it null in a way that we are not passing in the image path of a particular book. So having updated that, we also have to ensure that if we are to create a new book, we know that there would be cases whereby an author is creating a book and they are using the same title. So we're also going to ensure that whenever an author is creating a new book, the title for each book must be unique. So we have to therefore go ahead and create an if condition that is going to check if there is an already existing book title with the newly incoming book title that the author is creating at that time. So we are going to make use of this if condition. So for us to be able to make that query, we are going to do that using our book model. So this will be books, and we also have to ensure that we are importing the book model. So from app.models, then .books, shall import the book model. And having imported the model, we are going to go ahead and update our condition. So we have to ensure that the title is unique for that user ID of the author. So if book.query.filter by, so instead of the name, we are going to filter against the title. So this is going to be the title, and we shall also pass in the user ID, and this is going to be the ID for the author. So this will be assigned to our user ID variable that we have created. Then .first. So the .first method ensures that we are selecting the first record to which this condition is valid. So if this is not none, meaning that if we have a book with the same title as the newly incoming book title that is being created by an author at that time, and actually the same author, then that means that we have to therefore go ahead and return a response that book with this title and user ID already exists. So I'm going to go ahead and update this very first. So this is going to be book with this title, and user ID already exists. And then the status code is going to be a conflict, a 409 status code. So we are going to leave that in place. And then when we check up with the constraints that we created on our model, we can pretty see that the ISBN of a book must be unique. So we also have to ensure that before creating a new book, we check if the incoming request ISBN for that book that is created at that time does not match an ISBN number for a book that was already created. So I'm going to go ahead and make reuse of this condition and then update the indentation. So instead of us filtering against the user ID and the title, we are going to be filtering against the ISBN. So I'm going to go ahead and update this to ISBN, and if it exists, then this is going to be book ISBN already in use. So for cases whereby all these validations are false, meaning that all the required fields do exist within the request body, and then the book title does not match any already existing book for this author, and then the ISBN is not an ISBN that matches an already existing book, then we have to go ahead and create a new book. So this comment is now going to be updated to create new book. So whenever we are creating a new book, we always have to create a new instance on our book model. And for that case, we have to create a variable new book, and it's going to be instantiated on our book model or the book class. So this is going to be book. Now, with the fact that we have a constructor, when I try to hover on the class, we can pretty see that a book has a title, the price, the description, the pages, the user ID, the company ID, the price unit, the genre, the publication date, the ISBN that is optional, and same applies to the image. So I'm going to go ahead and update the constructor very fast to match the parameters that were passed in within the constructor for the book class. So having updated that, we know that we are working with an object relational mapper, and for that case, whenever we are creating a new instance on a particular class, we have to go ahead and add the newly created object to the DB session. So instead of us having new company, this is going to be new book, such that we add this object to this session and commit, so that we track the changes for this object. So having created this, we have to ensure that we are returning a meaningful response to the user. So within our response, for the message, we are going to make sure that we are returning the book title. For example, Python for Beginners Edition 1 has been created successfully. So I'm going to go ahead and update this to title. So the message is going to have the title such that it is dynamic for all books that are being created. So title, then we concatenate this, has been created successfully. And since we are creating a book, instead of us returning the company object, this is going to be updated to book. And for this case, we are going to be returning the attributes for this book that has been created, where we have the ID, the title, the price unit, and the description, and all the other attributes that we defined. So I'm going to go ahead and update this. So having updated the book attributes, when we try to cross-check up with our book model, we can pretty see that a book belongs to a company. So that means that it would also be a good user experience if we are returning the company information to which a book belongs. So for that case, I'm going to go ahead and ensure that I'm creating a new key for the company object, and this is going to be company. And within this object, I'm going to go ahead and ensure that we are also returning the attributes of the company. So I'm going to update this very fast. So what happens with the attribute values for the company? We know that a book belongs to a company. So the way we access the attributes of the company is by us saying that new book.company. So this is because of the fact that we defined a silent attribute company on the book model. So for that case, we have access to the details of the company. So newbook.company.id, then newbook.company.name, And then same applies to the author or the user. So we know that each book that is going to be created must belong to a particular user or a particular author. That means that we also have the ability of returning the author information while we create a new book. So for that case, I'm going to go ahead and add a new key called author, such that we return the user information or the author information for this book. So I'm going to go ahead and update this. So having updated it, we can pretty see that for us to be able to access the first name, last name, and username and all these other attributes for the author, we access our new book object that we have created. Then we know that a book belongs to a particular author or a particular user. So that means that for us to access those the values of the author, we use the user silent attribute on the book model. So that is the reason why I'm actually using this to access the attributes. So having created our logic that creates a new book, we are now going to go ahead and test this endpoint to ensure that it is working as expected. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new request file, and this is going to be add request. And then the request name is going to be create a new book. So as always, the first thing that you always have to update is the path plus the endpoint, and then the endpoint is going to be books/create. Then with the fact that we are creating a new resource to our back end, this is going to be a post method. And we know that our endpoints have been protected. That means that we have to pass in the authorization headers. And for this case, we are using a bearer token. Then since it's a post request, we need the body, and this is going to be updated to raw. So first and foremost, before we create any new books, you can pretty see that in our database, we do not have any books that have been created. So for this case, I'm going to choose an author for whom we can create some books for. I think we can use Daphne Nabatanzi. So shall ensure that we get an access token for Daphne Nabatanzi. And let me just make a new request to get a fresh access token. So I'm going to copy this up and ensure that I pass in her access token within the authorization headers. And then for the body, we have seen that our book has attributes like the title, the price unit, and all those others. That means that we have to pass in a JSON body within the request. So I'm going to go ahead and update this very fast. So within my update, I have the title, and the value is Python for Beginners edition 1. And then the price is 50,000. Then the price unit is Ugandan shillings. Then the genre is the category to which the book is going to belong, and this is programming. Then the description is going to be beginners Python guide, and then I'm passing in the ISBN, and since this is the first book, this can be book 1. Then the publication date, we can give it maybe 20th of June 2024, then some random image path, and then the company ID we are choosing to, then the number of pages is going to be 200. Now, we are going to test for 2 cases. The first case is going to be if we are not passing in the required parameters. So we know that the title, the price, and the price unit are required. So I'm going to cut this and make a new request. Alright, so my bad. Actually, before we test the endpoint, we do not have to forget the fact that we have to register our newly created blueprint within our application factory function. So I'm going to go ahead and access the application factory function and ensure that I'm importing our blueprint. So from app.controllers, then instead of companies, this is going to be books. Then books dot, this is going to be the company, my bad. This is going to be the book controller. And instead of importing the companies, we know that we are going to import the books. So having imported the blueprint, we have to go ahead and register it. So app.register blueprint, then pass in the value, which is books. So I'm going to run the application, and once again, I think I'll first do a Ctrl-Z and cut this and make a new request. So when I make a new request, we can see that the response that is returned is all fields are required. So for that case, I'm going to go ahead and ensure that we are passing in all the required fields in the request body and make a new request. So when I make a new request, we can see that the status code is a 201 and our book has been created successfully. As we can see, Python for Beginners Edition 1 has been created successfully, and the response data is having the author, the company, and then the book information, and this is pretty good for now. So let's try to access our database. So when I try to refresh the database, you can pretty see that our book has created successfully. We have the title, the number of pages, the price, the publication date, the ISBN. So when I make a new request without having updated the request body, you can pretty see that we are getting a 409 conflict. Book with this title and user ID already exists. So if we update this to edition 2 and make a new request, we can see that we are now getting book ISBN already in use, because of the fact that we know that the ISBN must be unique for each book. So I'm going to update this to book 2 and make a new request. So having made a new request, we can pretty see that our book has been created and the author and then the company information have also been created. And then the title is Python for Beginners Edition 2. And when I try to access the database, we can pretty see that this book has also been created. I hope you found this session insightful. Thanks for watching. Do not forget to like and subscribe if you found this video very helpful to you. See you again in the next session.